We are now about a week away from Election Day, and how you vote could change the face of Congress. One of the most controversial and most expensive Senate race in history is the battle between incumbent Senator Kay Hagan and House Speaker Thom Tillis. Retired WNCT news anchor Alan Hoffman is looking into the candidates and, where they're coming from. Welcome, Alan.
Yeah, Maria, I'm a busy guy for being retired.
You are.
Right? You and I were talking earlier about all the debates and the attack ads, and particularly in this campaign. And when I talked with State House Speaker Thom Tillis, he acknowledged how brutal all those ads are, but he says politics has always been rough and tumble. He sent me to YouTube to prove that. In fact, he told me the road to this battle for the Senate all began over a bike path. So who is this guy, and why is he working so hard?
Yeah, I grew up. I didn't see snow until I was 13 years old. So.
That's because Thom Tillis was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. During a walk along the Tar River, he and his wife Susan told me about the bumpy road to this point in their lives.
I went to 5 different schools, two technical schools and 3 colleges in 3 different states before I got my degree when I was 36 years old.
So where did that drive come from? Well, he credits his father, a boat draftsman who wasn't afraid of hard work.
He was born in 1929, so the year of the stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. He worked hard. That man who was always working 7 days a week.
Is he the one who kind of pointed you in the right direction?
Absolutely. He just taught me the value of hard work, and that transcended into everything I did, going to college.
His father was orphaned at an early age, but he wasn't the only one to teach his son about earning a living.
When I was living in New Orleans, and it was 1969, I was 9 years old, I had a next door neighbor. Her name was Miss Wright. I actually made money walking her cat. And I had a lot of very strong, hard work and role models when I was younger, and that told me I had to get to work.
Then jump forward a few years. After 2 failed marriages, both to his high school sweetheart, he met Susan.
So the first time we met was in Boston, and we had a conversation over dinner, and he said, there's 2 things you need to understand and know about me. And the first was that someday I'd like to serve in public service. And the second thing that he told me was, if this relationship goes any further, I'd like to have a son named Thomas Ryan Tillis. So I laughed because that was our first date, and 27 years later, yes, sir, we have both. So
I was pretty sure we were going to get married.
Yeah.
Well, I would guess. Yeah. Okay, so how did he get started in politics, and how does that bike path fit into this?
I'm an avid mountain biker, and I went to the town we lived in over in Cornelius and did a proposal to have a volunteer, no cost to the taxpayer, single-track mountain bike trail built, and they hoodwinked me into being on the Park and Rec Advisory Board. They said that'd be the easiest way to get it done.
And now, 8 years later, he is a leader in the State House, and he's knocking on the door of the U.S. Senate. Both he and Susan are lifelong Republicans. Oddly enough, their parents are lifelong Democrats. However, Tillis tells me he's wearing down his 82-year-old mother.
And she called me up one day and said, "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me I was a Republican? I see what you stand for, and I've been a Republican all my life." I said, "Welcome to the party, Mom."
Tillis says he's not surprised by the rough and tumble nature of this campaign. He says politics has always been that way. Like this parody of what attack ads might have looked like if John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were in a race today.
Are you prepared to see your dwellings in flames, female chastity violated, children writhing on a pike?
I'm John Adams, and I approve this message because Jefferson is the son of a half-breed Indian squaw raised on hoe cakes.
If you looked at the ads out there, you'd think Senator Hagan was a bad person, and that I am too, and it's silly. I mean, this is about what we stand for, our ideas, our belief in America, a belief that I believe that America needs to be made great again.
Now, the Tillises have 2 children, and I asked if they would encourage the kids to go into politics. He said, sure. She was a little more measured. She said they would encourage them to do what their hearts tell them to do. And by the way, Maria, that parody we just showed you actually contained the words written by Jefferson and Adams during their campaigns. And as usual, of course, I ask them the questions about the issues of the day. Go to our website, WNCT.com, and get them.
All right, thanks, Alan. And tomorrow you'll tell us a little bit about Senator Kay Hagan.
Absolutely. In fact, we talked about her political mentor, who happens to be her uncle.
All right, well, make sure you catch that. It's happening tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
Yesterday you sat down with Thom Tillis.
An interesting conversation. Tonight we talked with Kay Hagan. In fact, our state, this is the interesting part, our state could be the key to whether the Senate stays Democrat or goes Republican. That's an important story. This race is so important, in fact, millions of dollars of outside money from both parties has flowed into the state to influence your vote. Kay Hagan told me she will keep the job by using hard work and inspiration from a relative who burned some shoe leather to walk to his place in history.
Every summer I'd spend about a month on my grandparents' farm.
Kay Hagan says she is a city girl who loves the great outdoors and always has.
Being on a farm day in and day out, you were in the elements. And I really did. I'd go on long walks on dirt roads, spent a lot of time in the tobacco barn.
As a child, that's where she says she learned the value of hard work by cropping cotton on her grandfather's farm in South Carolina.
And it was hot, sweaty, flies, you know, it was hot work. But once again, I was outside, and I loved being outside. My grandmother taught Sunday school for 65 years. She and my granddaddy were the salt of the earth. When my dad was growing up, it wasn't until when he was a young child that the WPA came in and built their first outhouse. And they taught my grandmother how to cook using a pressure cooker.
She says that hard work and determination has guided her throughout her life. She cut her teeth on politics at a very early age. Her dad was mayor of Lakeland, Florida when she was growing up, and she worked to help her uncle, Lawton Childs, get elected to the U.S. Senate by putting on her walking shoes.
I was in his campaigns. He walked the state of Florida. We would go walking with him. He had children that were exactly my age, so we grew up together knowing that we had this great, honest man representing us in the U.S. Senate. I had a role model. It never concerned me that, you know, jump into this race, win or lose, you can make a difference.
Childs walked more than 1,000 miles to get his name known across Florida, so Kay Hagan knew if she wanted to be in politics, she would have to do something different in North Carolina.
You know, when I first ran, this was for the state Senate back in 1998, I actually knocked on 7,000 doors. I got the biggest bruise on my finger that I actually had to go and buy a knocker because it hurt so much. But you have an opportunity to meet people and understand what their issues are.
And one of the people she met early in life, she married, her husband, Chip.
I couldn't ask, one, for a better husband, but much less for a better campaign husband. My team said he's the best campaign spouse they've ever seen, and he is.
She says the family is active and always on the move. When she's home in Greensboro, she jogs 4 miles a day, or she goes on hikes in the woods with her husband and 3 children. And in politics, it is the family that protects and inspires her.
When we decided to run for re-election this year, I had my team come and bring the worst TV ads of the campaign, of the 2012 campaign. My daughter stood up and she put her hands up. She said, "Mom, our defenses are up. We are ready to go with you."
So the family's with you.
Family's with me 100%.
If there's one issue that seems to be guiding her more than the others, that too is tied to her family and especially to her childhood.
My dad grew up incredibly poor. But I didn't know what that was. I mean, you know, we're a happy family. But, you know, in my family, education is the real issue that made a difference. The fact that my dad was able to hitchhike off the farm and go to college, that transformed his life.
Now, one of the things you notice about Kay Hagan right off is her energy. She says that runs in the family too. And Angela, here's something else I found out about her that is really interesting. You know, when she was a kid, girls in sports just was passe. You couldn't do that. So she went into dance and took lessons. And she said at one point she wanted to be a ballerina. And she told me,
see her being
she told me I was good too.
Retired news anchor Alan Hoffman joins me back on the desk, and we asked him to look at incumbent Congressman Walter Jones. Alan, he surely has a leg up in this race.
Well, that's without a doubt. He's been walking the halls of Congress now for 20 years.
Wow.
And even before that, his father, Walter Jones Sr., was a congressman for 26 years. During the primary this year, however, for the first time, Jones faced another strong conservative. Taylor Griffin called Jones too liberal because he voted against his own party a number of times. Now, Griffin got a surprising 45% of the vote. Even Jones' staff tells me sometimes it's hard to know how the boss will come down on an issue.
My chief of staff says about me, when Walter Jones goes to vote, I don't know if he's going to vote as a conservative or as a populist or as a libertarian.
Is that a positive?
Well, to me it is.
But there has been fallout because of that difference. 90% of the people don't think you guys are doing a very good job.
I agree with them.
How do you agree with them?
Yeah.
As we pored over mementos of his 20 years in Congress, as usual, Walter Jones Jr. was straightforward about why he is there.
I'm a workhorse, not a show horse.
That bluntness all started when he changed parties from Democrat to Republican to win his seat 20 years ago.
At that time, I felt that our party, the principles of the Republican Party, advocated what I really thought was in the best interest of America.
At the time?
At the time.
Is it still?
Not as much as it needs to be, and I think that is showing itself when you've got the fastest growing category in North Carolina is unaffiliated.
Now, these faded pictures really tell the story of his life, and this picture in particular, Washington, March of 1992, a young man and his dad.
So I kneel beside my father, and this picture was made with me kneeling beside my father, and he died in September of that year.
This is a special picture for you.
It is special because of my love for my father and the influence he had on my life. He helped me understand that if you're given the privilege to serve the people, you can do some good.
It is the last picture the two would take together. His father died in his 26th year in Congress. Of course, that sparked his son into politics. But it was a discovery about his grandfather, who served in World War I, that focused his feelings for the military.
I got the records of my grandfather, who was gassed at the Battle of the Argonne Forest, and my grandfather committed suicide at the age of 36 in 1924 because he could not live with the pain. What I hope has changed since my grandfather was in World War I, that we have more ways to help psychologically those who have been to war and those who have been wounded, either mentally or physically, by war.
That's one of the reasons Jones is on the House Armed Services Committee today. Then his sunny disposition turned sad when he showed me the book.
All these are letters I have gotten back from families who received condolence letters. I've signed over 11,000 letters.
All kept in neat plastic folders in a black book.
I don't even read them. I can't read them because emotionally it bothers me that I sent their kids to die for an unnecessary war.
Jones voted for the invasion, a decision he says he regrets every day. Do you feel that's maybe your biggest mistake?
Absolutely. They manipulated the intelligence to justify an unnecessary war. I will believe to this day that if Saddam was still in power, all these jihadist groups would not be growing out here in the Middle East. I really believe that.
Another straightforward attack on members of his own party. For instance, he is not a big fan of House Speaker John Boehner.
I do not like the Speaker of the House. I don't think John Boehner is he's a good and decent man, but I don't think he's a policy leader.
Jones voted against Boehner as Speaker of the House, and he knows that cost him.
We coaxed longtime news anchor Alan Hoffman out of retirement to examine the people who want your vote. Welcome back, Alan.
Well, thank you very much. Feels the same but different, I got to tell you. Now, you got to tell you this, too. I really had a good time talking to all these candidates. They're interesting people. Tonight, let's start with the 3rd Congressional District and the man who's trying to unseat longtime Congressman Walter Jones Jr. Democrat Marshall Adame knows the experts say he is a long shot to win, but he believes his 30 years of public service will help him get your vote. Now, when I talked with him, I found this tough former Marine gets choked up over one person who changed his life.
I don't come from a privileged past. My past was very, very humble, very modest.
But Marshall Adame is a confident man.
In spite of the pundits, that I can win this race.
He invited me into his Jacksonville home for a talk with him and his wife, Becky. They've been married for 44 years, and Adame's resume is impressive.
I did 23 years in the United States Marine Corps. I'm a former United States diplomat. I'm a former member of the Congressional Commission on Wartime Contracting. I'm a veteran. I've been to 2 wars.
But why is he doing this now? Why step back from a job running an airport in Saudi Arabia to come home and face down a family dynasty of politics here in the East?
What we do now has got to count for our children. I've got 14 grandchildren. I'm very, very concerned about their future.
Adame was born in California to an Irish Catholic mother and a U.S.-born Mexican migrant farm worker. When he was 11, they split and abandoned the kid, so he and his 13-year-old brother Johnny ended up by themselves on the streets scavenging to survive.
I know what it is to be alone, to be afraid, and to be terribly abused to an extent that I don't even discuss ever in my adult life. But what it also teaches you is that you can't always trust what people say.
By his own admission, he didn't handle it well. When he was 12, Adame ended up in juvenile detention for 3 months. He says things there were pretty bad, and he took that with him when he got out.
Her father, who did not like me when he first saw me because I was a real hoodlum.
But Becky's father, now a pastor in Jacksonville, saw something special in this tough, abused teenager and made a simple gesture that changed his life.